Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. If this House was serious about climate action, this government would take the $30 a tonne cap on the climate pricing off of the biggest polluter in this province, which is LNG Canada, and return that money to people who need it to make it. The other thing this House has not been serious, or this government has not been serious about, is species at risk. The spotted owl is the symbol of BC's failure to protect at-risk wildlife. Only one wild-born spotted owl remains in a forest in BC, the only place in Canada where this species has ever been found. The federal government was prepared to issue a rare emergency order under Canada's Species at Risk Act to protect the spotted owl's critical habitat in a cruel twist. It turns out that the Minister of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship and his staff lobbied intently to dissuade the federal cabinet from issuing a spotted owl emergency order. A BC cabinet minister briefing document obtained under Freedom of Information states that the emergency order would have, quote, significant impacts on forest sector jobs and provincial revenue, and Ottawa should back away from issuing the order even when a species is at risk of extirpation. My question, through you, Honourable Speaker, is to the Minister of Water, Land, Resource Stewardship. How is arguing against protecting habitat for the last spotted owl considered stewardship?
Minister of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for her question. Promoting the recovery and reintroduction of northern spotted owls into British Columbia is a key priority for our government, and that's why we took three key important steps. First, in partnership with First Nations and the federal government, we established the world's first ever captive breeding program for spotted owl. Currently, there are 31 owls that exist at the breeding center. Second, we protected more than 280,000 hectares of critical habitat, old-growth habitat, that we agreed upon with the federal government and First Nations was necessary for at least 150 breeding pairs of spotted owl. So we know that the limitations right now on the reintroduction of spotted owl is not habitat, given the vast size. That is close to 700 Stanley Parks of old-growth forest. Lastly is the reintroduction of those spotted owls. We had an introduction just last year, and we have, with great humility and determination, introduced more spotted owls. We need the humility to understand that this is the first time this has ever been done in the world. We need the determination to keep doing it with our partners to make sure that owls are reintroduced successfully and breed in the wild on their own with the necessary habitat protection which we've set aside. Thank you.
Leader of the third party supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Let's be clear that what this province considers to be spotted owl habitat are areas that have been logged, that continue to be logged, and areas that are used for target practice, which I do not think contributes to the success of spotted owl reintroduction. Of the 3 owls that were introduced by this captive breeding program, 2 of them died and a third was found injured and had to return home. This government continues to approve logging in old-growth habitat that spotted owl would need to survive. It's evident that the status quo approach is not working. This government promised to bring in endangered species legislation. They failed to deliver. While they hum and haw, the list of at-risk species in the province grows and iconic species blink out. My question, Honourable Speaker, is to the Minister of Water, Land, Resource Stewardship. Will the Minister ensure that we see species at-risk legislation before the next election?
Minister of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me start with the end of my friend's question, and she would look forward, as we all have, as we've been building the biodiversity and ecosystem health framework with partners, particularly First Nations partners, who have been working with us every step of the way to introduce a framework as the first phase, and we expect that quite soon. And this will be an important structure for us, Mr. Speaker, in dealing with the serious question of species at risk, and of course the habitat that needs to be protected in order to allow those species to thrive once again in British Columbia. I would say, however, that I contend greatly with the 280,000 hectares of old-growth habitat that have been set aside. This was agreed to jointly between ourselves, Canada, and First Nations as the critical habitat that would allow, as I said, 150 breeding pairs to exist. I have faith in our partnerships with the Spuzan First Nation and Canada in the determination of that old-growth habitat, not described as the member did. I think that is incorrect. I think it is important to remain determined, to remain hopeful and focused on the habitat required to allow these species to be reintroduced successfully so that we can all celebrate their critical return to our province. Thank you.